It's not relevant here. I don't have an opinion on it because it's not relevant to this conversation. It's not relevant. We're talking about, I don't care. It's not relevant to this conversation. Not relevant. And your goal is to ramble about irrelevant stuff. We're not talking about that charge. I don't care about that charge. That's not what we came here to discuss. I haven't entered any statements. Notice how you just pivoted again to something completely irrelevant. Yeah, we're not talking about that. The definition of fraud. We're not talking about fraud. I don't know what any of these have to do with this.
What is wrong with you?
Suspects appear to have created an organized crime group with the purpose of recruiting, housing, and exploiting women by forcing them to create pornographic content meant to be seen on specialized websites for a cost. DICOT claims that it had identified 6 victims in the human trafficking case. Trafficking in human beings is defined as the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons for exploitation purposes by means of coercion, abduction, deception, or abuse of authority.
Sexual coercion epidemic in porn. Exploitation, coercion, and fraud are systematic in porn. Yeah, what does an article about porn have to do with the cam business?
We're not talking about porn. We're not talking about the cam business.
Yeah, we're not talking about porn at all.
No, we're not. We're not talking about the cam business either. We're talking about Andrew Tate. I don't care. It's not relevant to this conversation.
It is relevant because the prosecutors in Romania are part of DICOT, which is controlled by the Trafficking in Persons report established by the United States. And that DICOT organization that you can read about on the State Department, U.S. State Department website is deputized by the U.S. government to prosecute this case involving Andrew Tate. So it is highly relevant what the U.S. government does in previous cases of these kinds of accusations. Or he's non-Jewish.
I don't know what any of these have to do with this. We're talking about lying to somebody. It's not relevant. We're talking about lying to somebody.
The definition of rape is subjective based on.
You're trying to play some fuzzy around the edges thing to try to get me on a. Yeah, we're not talking about that.
The definition of fraud.
We're not talking about fraud.
And coercion are subjective. That's the point that I'm trying to.
Yeah, lying to somebody saying I was a virgin.
Core of the definition of rape.
There is a definition
of rape has to do with.
We're not talking about rape. We're talking about sex trafficking right now. We're talking about sex trafficking.
One of the charges is rape.
We're not talking about that charge. I don't care about that charge.
Why are we not talking about that charge? You don't care about rape? You don't care about the
when
rape
it comes
charge?
to Andrew Tate, the big charge is the sex trafficking. That's what he's being charged with.
There's an overlap in the definition for trafficking and the definition for rape because they
those
both
are two
involve
distinct things.
Fraud and coercion. Both of their definitions involve fraud and coercion. That's why I'm talking about the subjectivity of fraud and coercion. I didn't say that there's no definition of sex trafficking. I said that there is a definition of sex trafficking, but the critical parts of that definition are subjective and ever-evolving standards. For example, affirmative consent. Do you believe in affirmative consent?
Nobody is talking about affirmative consent here. It's not part of
That's part of the trafficking. Why? Because trafficking uses the concept of coercion. Coercion. So if you do something against your consent, that is coercion. That's part of the definition of sex trafficking in Romanian law. Now you're saying it's irrelevant. So how do you define consent?
No one's talking about affirmative consent here. That's beyond the scope of this conversation. If you need help figuring out what consent means or whatever, I'm sure there's tons of videos on YouTube.
You're not acknowledging. You're not acknowledging how contested these terms are.
No,
you're not acknowledging
it's not contested here. That's not what's being contested.
Then why isn't affirmative consent the standard of consent?
We're not talking about affirmative consent. It has nothing to do with sex trafficking.
Why are we not talking about it?
I don't know.
It's Biden's definition of consent.
We're not. Biden is not the president of Romania.
Do you even know what? Do you even know what affirmative consent is? Are you not familiar with Eastern European girls being exploited by these?
Yeah, of course I am.
Companies?
That's why Eastern European women are exploited quite often. That's why Andrew Tate set himself up in Romania so they could exploit Eastern European women. That's why Tristan and Andrew Tate send text messages on Instagram to 15 and 16-year-old Romanian girls so that they can also exploit them. That's what they do.
Yeah, so
I am aware of that. Thank you.
All of the U.S. pornographic industry is exploitative by those standards because there are women coming from Eastern European. Women from Eastern Europe are coming to the U.S. on all kinds of promises of wealth and fame, they are burned by that industry and they complain about it online. But you don't care about any of those cases, Destiny. You only care about Andrew Tate.
I came here today to debate about Andrew Tate. I didn't come here to talk about every single form of
You come here to talk about sex trafficking?
No, I didn't come here to talk about sex trafficking. I came here to talk about Andrew Tate's accusations of sex trafficking. If you want to have a broad conversation about sex trafficking, we can.
How can you talk about Andrew Tate sex trafficking without talking about the institution of sex trafficking, the legal definition of sex trafficking, the components of the definition of sex trafficking? How can you have a conversation? Because every time I bring up these details of all of these parts of Andrew Tate sex trafficking, you say that's not relevant.